Folks, we're chatting with Brian Egger. He is the author of a new book, Social Media Strategies for Investing, How Twitter and Crowdsourcing Tools Can Make You a Smarter Investor. He's also considered a Wall Street Journal Best of the Street. Now, what got you to the point where, in your analysis of what's going on with the market and the street, where you decided that you'd pen a book on social media and targeting the understanding and the knowledge for investors?
Well, Bill, I worked on Wall Street as an equity research analyst for about 20 years and used a variety of tools, and it's really only during the latter half of that career phase that I became aware that social media was becoming more and more important. It was becoming more important because companies were using it to communicate with investors. Investors were talking amongst themselves, and I will tell you that not only is this a bit of a wake-up call for individual investors, but even on Wall Street, a lot of equity research analysts, because of the compliance restrictions, are fairly limited in their ability to use social media, and it is a valuable research tool that I think is really underutilized.
As a research tool, it's interesting because I think it started out as a connection tool, something
That's correct.
for as it says, social purposes, and to sort of share, be a little bit more transparent in an electronic way about what's going on in your life and what's going on in the lives of other people. But as you point out, it's become a pretty important research tool, and one that can get you a little bit faster information than somebody's prepared report that might take days or weeks or months to actually get out to the public.
That's correct. And when I worked on Wall Street and I followed the gaming, leisure, travel sector, a lot of fun stocks to follow, and I covered what's happening in casino land, I used Twitter to follow the messages of specialized journalists that specialized specifically in regulatory developments in markets that I cared about.
From a standpoint of which social media avenues, which specific medium is your choice? You mentioned Twitter several times now. Is that where you think the best information is, or at least the most current information is on Twitter?
Twitter is a great source of information, particularly if, and the key rule I would use if you're looking for a stock, use the convention of using what's called the hashtag. If you want to find out information about Apple, you type in $AAPL. You use a $hashtag rather than a hashtag. The problem with Twitter, and the limitation of it, is that it's unpoliced and not particularly well curated, so there's a lot of information there. And so some individuals may prefer to narrow down the funnel of choices available to use other so-called curated websites where some of those recommendations and selections are made for you, whether it's StockTwits or other websites. So Twitter is terrific, but it is a utility, and you will get a lot of information, and you have to constantly narrow down to be selective about who you follow, use carefully defined searches, and use it really as a selective tool to supplement what you're doing elsewhere.
What extent do we trust the information that's out there?
I would say that just as you can't trust at face value any source of information coming from conventional media, you have to be equally wary about the source and authenticity of information coming from social media resources. And that's why when institutional investors and so-called high-frequency traders use Twitter to get insight into the market, they do so by using middlemen. They use intermediaries that analyze the data and try to vet the data to make sure that what they're interpreting and what they're reading is accurate and authentic. And that's very important, particularly when you don't know the author of a blog article or something on social media. You do have to take everything with a grain of salt, just as you would using conventional media.
And then the book even mentions in the subtitle crowdsourcing tools.
Yes.
And we've heard of crowdfunding. We've talked about that a lot on the air. But what is crowdsourcing?
Well, the idea of crowdsourcing is that very often individuals can get better, more accurate, more authentic insight by drawing on the wisdom or insight of communities of individuals, well-informed individuals, rather than turning to any particular expert. And that's a really powerful thing. And increasingly there is evidence that in the world of finance, crowdsourced or community-sourced insights can be more accurate and more helpful than that from any one expert. That the crowd very often provides insight. So there are a number of websites out there like StockTwits and Estimize that simply have been developed based on this notion that the crowd is sometimes, under certain conditions, a great source of insight, more so than an individual expert.
You talk about, you mentioned as an example in the book, SumZero.com. It's about 6 years old now, and it's one of the tools that professionals use out there. To what
That's
extent is
correct.
it policed for accuracy or held accountable? To what extent can we trust the information we're getting on one of
Well,
these?
SumZero is a somewhat more closed network because you have to be a institutional or buy-side investor to participate and get research. The only way you can get research is if you periodically contribute research. And so it is a little bit more of a niche community, in part because it's really meant to produce research by institutional investors for institutional investors. There are others that are considerably more open and egalitarian in terms of how they source information. SumZero is one of those that's a little bit more of a closed network because you have to be of a certain professional profile in order to use the network.
And how does that compare with StockTwits, which you brought up a couple times now?
StockTwits, again, anyone can join.
Yeah.
But the way I would think about StockTwits is, and again, trust and curation is important. You can use it in different ways. You can choose to follow all the stocks that are trending, meaning everything that's being mentioned in social media. You can choose to follow the messages of individuals that are recommended to you by the management of StockTwits, or if you have a background where you care a lot about one industry, like I did professionally, there may be 15 or 20 stocks you want to follow very closely, and you can set up a personalized watch list.
Gotcha.
So that every time there's an update, you'll find out. And so you can basically move from stream to stream based on how granular you want to be when you track messages.
We only have a couple minutes left, and I just want to ask, what are your favorite sites? In other words, there's just so many sites out there, and you reference a lot of them in the book, and Market Watch and others. There's so many websites and feeds. But for you, what are some of the 2 or 3 most accurate and most important sites for gathering information?
Well, I mentioned StockTwits a lot because it's become a major venue with 300,000 and so members, and it's certainly gained some traction in what I would call the microblogging or shorter form research. That's very different. If I have an appetite for quick messages, that's a much more valuable source than, say, using Yahoo Finance. If I'm looking for something that's more expansive, longer form, maybe it's Harvest or something like that. But I really use different websites for different purposes.
Okay. And we're just about out of time, and I want to make sure people know where to find the book. Again, folks, the name of the book is Social Media Strategies for Investing, How Twitter and Crowdsourcing Tools Can Make You a Smarter Investor. And Brian, in addition to finding the book on where I guess it was published or went public on the 1st of November.
That's correct.
It's at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, where it gets great reviews. I assume people can find it at local bookstores?
It is in local bookstores, and also anyone who wants to follow me and find out about what I'm saying about the book, you can follow me at BreakingCall.com.